The government just released its 2025 budget. Billions promised, bold headlines, and big claims. But does any of it actually help you own a home? In the budget, they unveiled billions of spending, a new federal home building agency, and tax cuts for first time homebuyers. Sounds impressive until you take an actual look at the numbers. We were promised 1.4 million homes, and we didn't even come close. Rent is still sky high, affordability hasn't returned, and some of the biggest promises have quietly just disappeared. So today I'm going to be cutting through the spin and breaking down what the 2025 budget means for housing in Canada. What's real, what's fluff, and what's actually going to help. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date on what's happening in Canada's real estate market. First, let's recap the big housing initiatives announced in this year's budget, because on paper, it's a lot of money and new programs. The first one is Build Canada Homes. This federal housing agency launched in September of this year to build affordable housing at scale. The budget gives it an initial $13 billion injection to supercharge housing construction in Canada, with a mandate to double the pace of housing construction across the country. Build Canada Homes, or BCH for short, has already announced 4 projects. The first is developing 6 federal land sites to construct 4,000 rental homes. Yep, you did the math correct. That's $3.25 million per home. The second is a new $1.5 billion Canada Rental Protection Fund, which is aimed to help nonprofits buy older rental buildings to keep them affordable. Another $1 billion will be spent to build supportive housing for those who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. In short, BCH is supposed to deploy capital quickly and use innovative methods to boost supply. It's focused on non-market housing, things like co-ops, community housing, and affordable units. The budget then introduces the Build Communities Strong Fund, which pledges $51 billion over 10 years to support the infrastructure needed for this new housing. But to access that money, provinces and cities must match funding and cut development charges for builders. Ottawa is essentially bribing municipalities to lower those often hefty fees that increase the cost of new homes. However, this falls short of the Liberals' campaign promise to cut development costs in half, but we'll talk more about that later. The budget also commits new funding for Indigenous housing to the tune of $2.8 billion. There's also about $19 billion over 5 years for Indigenous and Northern infrastructure. Next up, the budget highlights investment in cooperative housing. $423 million has already been allocated for 8 different co-op projects, bringing 837 new homes. To help aspiring homeowners, the budget eliminates the 5% GST on new homes up to $1 million for first-time homebuyers. This one is an immediate cost savings. On an $800,000 condo, you would save about $40,000. The government also says that it will increase the Canada mortgage bond limit from $60 billion to $80 billion starting in 2026. In plain English, CMHC can guarantee more mortgages on apartment builds, giving builders cheaper financing. This is a behind-the-scenes change, but Ottawa expects this to make it easier for developers to build rentals across Canada. Interestingly, they also decided to scrap the underused housing tax starting this year. Its removal has raised eyebrows, and it's a sign that the feds are moving away from these types of measures, probably because they're not very effective. To address skilled labor shortages in construction, the budget sets aside $75 million over 3 years for union-based apprenticeship training in Red Seal trades. Construction labor is a major bottleneck. Money for training is helpful, though $75 million is fairly modest considering this is nationwide. Those are the key housing-related promises in the 2025 budget. In total, the government pegs new housing investments at around $25 billion over a span of 5 years. It's a big number, and it sounds great, right? But will these measures actually make housing more affordable in Canada? It's one thing to announce billions of dollars in spending, and it's another to translate that into homes that are affordable for people to buy. The government's ambition is undeniable. They want to double the pace of home building from 280,000 units per year to over 400,000 units per year. That is a massive leap. BCH is the vehicle supposed to drive this. BCH's mandate is to move quickly and cut through red tape. For example, it's already moving on a project in Toronto to build 540 rental homes with 40% affordable units using modular construction on federal land. However, these efforts may only bear fruit in the medium term, not immediately. Even with streamlining, it takes time to plan, approve, and construct these thousands of rental homes. Do we even have enough skilled trades, materials, and efficient permit processes to literally double housing starts? As of right now, the answer is no. The federal plan relies heavily on Team Canada cooperation. That means cities and provinces removing zoning and regulations that make it harder to build homes fast. BC has already taken one step closer to this and ended single-family zoning in 2024, allowing multiplexes in all cities, which align with federal goals, but we are now seeing municipal pushback on that in multiple areas. The budget is focused on rentals, co-ops, and affordable housing. Over time, more supply should dampen the relentless price growth we've seen in the rental market. They're basically saying, well, invest heavily now and hopefully in 5 to 10 years, this will help housing prices stabilize. For Canadians hoping that this budget would magically make homes more affordable for 2025 and 2026, sorry, that's just not going to happen. There's very little in here that provides immediate relief on housing costs for the average person. The GST break for first-time homebuyers buying brand new homes is really the only one that is going to give immediate relief, which is going to help a subset of people. Almost everything in the budget is geared towards rentals, co-ops, affordable housing, and non-market homes. Very little of it addresses home ownership supply. If you're a developer trying to build condos or a buyer looking for new inventory to purchase, there's almost nothing here for you. The first-time homebuyer GST rebate helps, but only on new builds. And the government's own housing agency is focused entirely on rentals. So yes, the budget might help you find a place to live, but it doesn't help you build equity, invest your future, or escape the rent cycle. And for millions of Canadians, that's a real miss. So what's the verdict? The 2025 budget does represent a significant intervention in Canada's housing crisis. However, my analysis is that the budget is very heavily long-term oriented and not offering a bunch of immediate help for those in need. It's a bit like planting a forest to deal with a wood shortage. Great for the future, but it won't build your house today. Meanwhile, everyday Canadians are facing sky-high rents and housing prices that put ownership out of reach. In that sense, the budget can feel very disconnected from the urgent reality that we face. Even the government's own commentary frames it as investing for those in the future rather than dealing with today's problems. Moreover, when it comes to Liberals and their track record for promises made for the housing sector, it's very poor. They've enacted a lot of policies, but the outcomes have not yet matched the promises. There's a credibility gap. We heard pledges to build a tidal wave of homes, to make housing more affordable for youth, to end homelessness, and by 2025, much of that remains unrealized. As a critical observer, I would say that the skepticism is warranted until we see shovels in the ground and cranes in the sky. The ideas are there, the execution will be the true test. Deliver the affordable homes that Canadians need. In conclusion, my take is that the 2025 budget's housing measures are helpful, but not sufficient. They are helpful in a way where we absolutely need to spend tens of billions of dollars to build more homes. But they are not sufficient because money alone won't fix things unless it's accompanied by radical improvements in how housing is approved and built, and unless the promised units can actually materialize. There are still glaring gaps and no strong mechanism to hold the federal government accountable for not meeting its housing promises. As a result, Canadians will likely continue to feel a housing squeeze for the next few years. So if you're a young Canadian, working hard, saving, hoping to buy a place of your own, this budget doesn't help get you there. It helps you rent a little bit more affordably, but it almost does nothing to actually help you own a home. The dream of home ownership is slowly getting further and further out of reach, and this government hasn't shown that it knows how to bring it back yet. If you're trying to figure out what this means for your personal housing plan, book a discovery call with me using the Calendly link below. Because here's the truth. The 2025 budget is big on announcements, bold numbers, flashy programs, and a lot of recycled promises. But when you stack it up against what the government said they'd do for housing back in 2021, the gap is obvious. What do you think? Are these measures in the budget going to help out in your community? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences or skepticism.